Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody's having a beautiful day. It's Friday. It looks like we made it. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Got a great show for you today. And let me just say, it is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest, Shane Smith, the principal and founder of Everetics. With over 2 decades of invaluable experience in navigating the complexities of small and large enterprise software, SaaS business, Shane has successfully addressed challenges ranging from recession to hypergrowth and IPOs. As the visionary leader behind Everetics, Shane has established a company committed to paying it forward and overcoming customer support, service, and success challenges. Everetics offers a spectrum of services, including CX financial modeling, fractional leadership, support work 360, and a support and service readiness assessment. Shane's dedication to exceptional services as the backbone of success is evident in his approach to delivering practical and strategic CX solutions. His expertise has been widely recognized by industry leaders and prestigious awards, including the TSIA Customer Success Gold Star Standard and the Stevie Customer Success Award and the Service Strategies Support Center Practices Certification. Shane Smith, thank you for being here today, my friend. How are you?
I'm nervous after that intro. I'm doing awesome, George. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much. And it's nice to be here. And I love conversations where I get to speak with people who get to teach me things. And you and I were just talking briefly before the show. What an amazing time we live in, and how successful things can be if you're willing to take a different approach.
Yeah, think about things more broadly, right? And be okay with learning something new or thinking different about a problem. And I personally feel like that's where the magic happens. If you want the same result, do the same thing everybody else is doing. And we saw how that worked out in 2023. So,
yeah,
at least in SaaS tech world, but
yeah, that's an interesting world. The software as a service. Like, how did you find yourself in that aspect?
oh my lord. So a little bit, I guess, about me, George.
Sure, please.
So I was born a geek, a nerd, back before it was cool to be a geek and a nerd. So we used to, call it propeller heads. My God-given gift was software programming. So I was first published back in the days. For some of your viewership, there used to be magazines that we would buy, and you would have to type in the codes, and you had a special program, and it would tell you whether or not you typed in the line exactly right, and you'd go through pages and pages and pages of this. So I was first published in one of these magazines when I was in 5th grade, and kind of stuck with that. And it was, when I say it was my God-given talent, it's the only talent. It's not transferable to languages. I passed Spanish with a D-, Spanish 2 in high school with a D-, and a promise to my Spanish 2 teacher that I wouldn't take Spanish 3 based on class participation. I have never worked harder in my life in a class than Spanish 2. So it's not transferable, but computer languages were really, really easy. So went to school, joined the Air Force, actually targeted ICBM missiles.
Wow.
But again, just all software. Got out of the Air Force after a great experience, by the way. So got out of the Air Force, did some consulting, and there was a company that called BEA Systems. Everybody wanted to work at BEA Systems. And I would have pushed a broom. I would have done the toilets at BEA Systems, up to and including taking a support job. So I went from a Java architect at the time, and we were in Omaha, Nebraska, and we moved to Boston, which was near where I grew up anyway. And I took a support job, and at my dream company, right? And it was amazing. And it didn't take me very long after working there to realize that I was probably in the right place in the support job or in the hierarchy based on just the brilliance that this company had employed with them. And I did that job support job for 6 months. And at the end of that 6 months, I would have rather done the toilets or pushed the broom, up to and including taking a management job. So this is the kind of my big inflection point for me.
Yeah.
I was dealing with a customer escalation, and it was a kind of a gnarly one as a support engineer. And on Friday, I was a support engineer, and then over the weekend, I became a manager because I went to the dark side and took that opportunity. On Monday, I came back into the same exact customer escalation, and the customer treated me so nicely, unlike what they had done, the week prior. And I didn't change that much over the weekend.
Right.
It was basically the same human. And what really struck me, and I really genuinely mean it, is how much harder and more challenging the job of sitting in the chair of the support person or the customer service person is, rather than the managers and the leaders. And this was, somewhere in the neighborhood of the dot bomb days, so around 2000-ish. And before servant leadership was something that you see on LinkedIn posted, every 2 or 3 times. And that kind of carried me forward. I also, and I went and I did multiple leadership roles and in support and service, though I never forgot who had the harder job. It was my job to go get the coffee for the people doing the hard work, not the other way around. And then something else happened to me, and I was reflecting on this with somebody else, I think last week. I essentially hit Powerball. So I have a story unlike most people do, where I can go through my career, including all the way back down to like the Air Force days. I have never, ever had a bad boss. Okay, I had one briefly. And we saw how that worked out. However, I've probably worked for 40 people, throughout my career, and every single one of them have just been fantastic mentors and coaches to me. And so when we talk about Everetics and paying it forward, I've had most of the support roles. I've led teams, and I've also been so damn lucky in my career that in December, despite the maybe the economic circumstance, I was in a place where I could, go out and start paying it forward, and I have a lot of debt to pay for, a lot of debt. So that's a little bit about me. Well, that's a lot of bit about me.
I love it. You and I had talked previously, and I was, as I hear you talking again now, there was something you said in one of our last conversations that was something along the lines of the people at the top should treat the people that they lead the way they want those people to treat their customer. Do you remember? Maybe you could flesh that out. Maybe you can say that again and talk to that a little bit. I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah. So I'm a big, based on that story, and hopefully it makes a little bit of sense where that's coming from now.
Yep.
The employee experience, you treat your employees the way you want them to treat your customers.
Right. That's it.
And it's just that simple. The employee, a happy employee, an empowered employee, an autonomous employee, of course we're going to have processes and stuff like that. Sure. And I'll share a story to Please. kind of put a pin on this. That's it. The employees are going to take care of your customers if they're loyal and they're happy. Happy employee makes a happy customer. That's the rocket science. So back in the 80s, there was a movie called E.T. or the Extraterrestrial, and they nailed it. Despite all the bad things that we did in the 80s, E.T. got it. Be kind. It's just that easy. It's just that easy. Here's a real world example, and it's pretty tragic, but it's true. One of my earlier bosses, my mentors, had something terrible happen to him, and his son, who was about 30, passed. And unexpectedly passed away. So, and I mean, as a parent, that's our worst nightmare, right? To have to deal with that. So he's from another country, but living in the US, and he made phone calls, back, international calls, and so forth and so on. And then he got his bill, his mobile phone bill, and it was quite large. So he called the phone company just to kind of audit through it. Didn't want anything. Went through it, explained to them, what had happened. And the wireless agent put him on hold for about 10 minutes. And now he's a customer service guy too, so he's kind of getting mad, right?
Right.
And came back on the phone. They said, Mr. So-and-so, this is an example of an empowered agent, right? Somebody that can go outside a process. I just want you to know we've comped your entire month and next month. No. And then within the week, he told me he got flowers at his door from the company.
Wow.
Now, come on. That's it. And then and when he was telling me this story, he was like, I will never leave this company. That's a loyal customer right there. And that was an example of somebody being a human being to somebody else, being kind. So
I love it.
Treat your employees right. Treat your employees right, and be kind. That's the rocket science.
How do you think that mobile company is going to be able to pay their shareholders, though?
They're doing very, very well. It is I can't name drop, I guess, but it's the biggest wireless company in the US.
Yeah, I love that story, and I hope the people listening are affected by it. And it's amazing how an act of kindness like that can be contagious, not only for the people that the conversation is between, but for the workplace environment. When they start hearing about that and start understanding, wow, I feel great about this. Kind of like being here now, and it just pays these empathy dividends that radiate outwards and make things a little better. Too often we hear the opposite side of that, where I work for a large multinational corporation, a giant brown truck delivered packages. And the level of dehumanization on some there, where you go in and you have to walk this barbed wire fence, and then you have to go through this metal detector in case you're stealing something or bringing in a weapon. And then you go into the office and your name has like an equal sign by all these numbers, and then there's a minus by this number, and then you're pulled in because, hey, we don't think that you're really getting measured by these variables the right way. And just the level of like, hey, you realize that my kid was sick yesterday? Like, that has never even entered into the equation.
That's right.
It's palpable in there sometimes. Like, there's people may not know that, but in a lot of warehouses, there's fights. People commit suicide. There's accidents. There's injuries, and those too are contagious on another level. And by the time that emotion radiates to 8,000 miles away to a guy in a boardroom, it's like that number is easily replaced. So sometimes it feels like it's being worked against us. Do you see this landscape changing, or maybe those are two different methods, or how do we get to be more like the first example and less like the second example?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and this is unscientific, but it's my opinion. What I've seen, especially in technology and SaaS this year, obviously budget constraints, right? We're in the official not recession right now, and what I have experienced and what I've seen and what I've coached some clients on is the backside of a RIF, or a reduction in force, means there's less people at the company to do the same amount of work, usually, right? And I have a client. He was an individual contributor. He spent 1 year as a manager, and now as a director. That's his learn on the job training, 1 year. And he reached out to me because he was like, basically, I don't know what I'm doing, or something like that. like
Right.
super smart guy. They made the right decision, but he's in a hyper growth SaaS company. And I think we have a lot of people now, because of what's happened in this economy, right or wrong, good or bad, that are now being thrust into roles that maybe they didn't have the benefit of, like what I had with the
Right.
mentors and going through. Plus, everybody's too busy or too gainfully employed, to spend the time. I, I think there's a knowledge gap on leaders, and it's not saying that people are bad. I think,
Right.
again, not scientific, I would gander that 99% of the people out there mean well. They want to be kind, however, they haven't had they're learning on the job, or they're being stressed by somebody as well. I think there's two sides of the equation, and like a benefit of the doubt goes a long way, I think, in that regard. So
Yeah.
how do we get closer to that? Let's give the leaders some support too. It's not all about, it's mostly about our employees, but it's a little bit about our leaders as well. Like, let's help them. Again, 99% of them want to probably be good.
Yeah.
Maybe you just don't know yet how.
Yeah.
I don't know.
do.
It's an interesting, conundrum, I think, that we're in. But
Yeah, I see it shifting. I see the idea of mental health is really beginning to find a foothold in corporations and places, whether it's retreats or whether it is having a mental health committee or a mentor committee there. And, there really is becoming places where people that if they have a problem, they can go to other employees, or maybe they have a certain manager that they like that they can turn to that's really wanting to help them solve the problem rather than be productive, or maybe getting them to solve the problem equals much more productivity. There's a novel idea. Look, if we can make our relationship better, everyone's going to be more productive. Like, that's a pretty good way to look at it. And I see it kind of shifting. Do you kind of see the landscape shifting? It seems like a lot of the books that were written in 2000 around that time were like, the opposite of good is great. And like all these books that were like, you got to scare everybody, man. And people respond to intimidation, not love, but that seems to be shifting now.
it's funny you bring up Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. That's one of my favorites, by the
Of
way.
course.
I had a mandatory book list when I brought in managers, and that was one of the 3 books on there. Leadership, Self-Deception, Good to Great, because that's the way that the world kind of thinks about things still.
Yep.
So don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Read the book, so when somebody says, wrong seat on the bus, you know what that means, right? What's the other one? Leadership and Self-Deception, Good to Great. Oh, and Now Discover Your Strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the 3 requirements. We can't even go on till you've read those 3 books. But do I see it shifting? Honestly, no. I don't. I think people want to be good. I think people innately want to be good. Nobody goes. There might be a couple, but most people don't go home and want to, somebody else to die in a fire or something like that. Though in this constrained environment, it's a pressure cooker. It's a pressure cooker. And it is for the leaders too, And then what happens is, I'll give you another real example. I was out with my better half. We are Universal Studio Hollywood geeks. So we go there probably every other week, by the way, because of their customer experience. It's amazing. Can't promote them enough. So we were there, and this is kind of like our recharge time.
Mm-hmm.
So we're there, just she and I, and she gets an email on her phone. It's a Saturday, I don't know, like 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30 in the morning, from her C-level executive, no description, meeting Monday morning. Okay, so given this economy, and you get an email with no description on a Saturday for first thing Monday morning, where does your head go? I know where mine goes. Like, uh-oh, right?
Yeah.
And she was terrified the entire weekend. Now Monday morning came around, and we're all braced and ready. It was just a check-in. Hey, this thing over here or whatever ruined our entire weekend. Like, that's terrible leadership.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it happened intentionally, but it probably is something that if they had been through like junior varsity management training class, then they would have known maybe to not send that email, or put 4 more seconds in and type a few words. And that happens all over the place. So I don't know. That's my thought, I guess. I don't think it's getting better. I think it's going to be a little while before we can start addressing the leadership gap, at least in tech and SaaS.
It makes sense when I think about it, a leadership gap in education. If we look at it from a demographic point of view, there's a large percentage of the baby boomer generation that has been in power for a long time and that still hold the keys to the kingdom. One of the biggest problems that I see in what I do and in some of the executives that I talk to is that there is a tendency to not share information, if that makes sense. A lot of people have gotten to places and they know a lot of things, but they're like, hey, I had to earn this the hard way. I'm not going to give it to them. And I think in some ways that really hinders the next group of people, because are they going to learn what you learn? Why don't you want to share? Is it because you're afraid that you're losing an edge, you're losing your spot, or they're not going to learn things the right way? But maybe we could speak to this idea of withholding information. Like, that's a pretty big one, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of ironic. I'm going to call you out on this, George.
Okay, please.
You kind of made fun of good to great a few minutes ago, and I think good to great exactly talks about the levels of leadership, right? And to use another tragic example, I'm pretty sure Apple is one of, if not the biggest successful tech company in the world, right? And Steve Jobs died. And he passed, and now Tim Cook runs Apple. And I don't think they missed a beat in the process. So sharing and imparting knowledge. If you're being a great leader, you are setting yourself up to be replaceable. It's not about you anymore as a leader. It's about your team. Right. It's about your people, your humans, that are relying on you. And I have seen it, and as far as harboring that knowledge and locking onto it, and when I've had employees bring it up or say this, flippantly, you're fired. If you're going to harbor that knowledge, you're not helping the tribe.
Yeah.
Right. And at that point, you're better not just like leave. We'll figure it out, and then the tribe will all know it. So when I was in college, I was taking a class, and now a true story, but it stuck with me too. A Pascal class, and the professor recounted a story. I don't know if it's true or not, but I know that he did recount the story. This part's true, where in a corporate world, so this probably would have been the 80s, there was a software engineer that was writing code, doing this program. Program comes out great, looks good. The boss looks at it, and all of his variables are named after mythical gods, right? And the idea is like you should be able to show code, and like humans that don't do it for a living should be able to look at it and at least make sense of it. But if you have Zeus, Zeus plus plus, that makes no sense. So he said, why did you name all your variables after mythical gods? and the programmer, the software engineer, supposedly told him job security, and the boss said, "You're fired." So you have to share knowledge. Don't hold on to it. And the thing is, now between AI, between Google,
Yeah.
it's. I have a good friend in sales, and we debate on this pretty often. However, I'm in the camp where like knowledge is so widespread out there. It's free. I can have my opinion. I can have my experience. That's valuable. The knowledge itself is free. So why try to harbor it? Why try to sell it? Now my sales friend will fight me on this, but it's the way I see the world, at least.
Yeah, it's well done, and I think, especially when it comes to sales, it's interesting. In Steve Jobs' biography, he talks about you can see the trajectory of a company, and that when the founder leaves, or when sales start to fall, or when profits start to fall, the engineers go to the wayside and the sales team comes up. And he says that's a
Oh yeah.
sure sign that your company is going to die. Like when you allow the people that move the needle, to start using rhetoric, or using these methods of enhancement in some way, because they are enhancing it in some way. And I'm not using that as a pejorative, but like, in some ways they're making things better, but it's kind of this illusion, like this idea that, you can use the trivium in order to make it better. And maybe you can, but yeah, like I think that there's something to be said about the dissemination of information from that level. But it's interesting. I should clarify, like I spent my limited knowledge of business and relationships with employees to management comes from me being a union guy. So I'm totally biased on one side, and so that's why I tend to I find myself going down this path of like, what about that? I try to be more open and more empathetic to both sides, as someone who's led a mentor program or a safety committee, and speak to younger drivers. And it's just interesting. And I'm sure I've always fantasized about working for like a startup or a smaller company where the culture was really welcoming to everybody. There's a great story about the NASA project when we were putting men on the moon, and I forgot who it was that walked into the NASA headquarters like at 3 a.m. There's a janitor pushing a broom, and they're like, "What are you doing here, sir?" And he's like, "I'm putting a man on the moon."
Yeah.
It's just this idea of like, wow, like, yeah, you're right. You are doing it. Why? Of course you are. Like, that's the kind of foundation that I think takes a company, a program, an organization, or an idea to the next level. Is this idea that we're all in this thing. Me, you, everybody coming up on that. That's a powerful idea right there. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, I think it's tremendous. Tremendous. It's funny. Having been in the United States Air Force, I realize mileage may vary, right? Everybody's got their own experiences. But going back to my story, I've never had a bad boss.
Yeah.
And one of the things I believe that the military does exceedingly well is, at least based on my own personal experience, the cook to the stealth fighter pilot are all important. And they're all aligned to that one mission, just like you were saying in your NASA story as well. And company, say what you will, there are certainly, dark sides of the military and stuff like that. And again, mileage may vary. However, they nail that. It is fraternal, no doubt about it. And yes, they are bad bosses in the military too. I just didn't get them. And companies have a harder time emulating that. And make no mistake, right? If any of your listeners out here are at work and you think it's a family, make no mistake, business is not family. You can have friends there, but business is business, and hopefully it's a happy place. However, you don't riff your son or your daughter from your family. right?
Yeah.
I wrote a post the other day on LinkedIn where I said, I've got to come clean. I laid off my 10-year-old on Friday. He was on a PIP and he jumped over the soccer ball and the other team scored, so we had to let him go.
Yep.
You don't do that. That's the ridiculousness of kind of the corporate culture and where we are at right now, in my opinion, where it's not family, yo.
Yeah.
It's not. So make it a good place. Build congruent relationships and understand a business is a business. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? And relationships are important. For crying out loud, I met my wife, at work. So those things happen, but business is business. And I think from my perspective, George, I have spent a lot of time, and perhaps this is something that I learned too late.
Yeah.
In the tech and the business world is financials. So there are a lot of impassioned customer service leaders out there, hearts of gold. And there's statistics here, like I've got them all written down, or at least a lot of them all written down here. We all know, I think we know innately, like a happy customer is like, that's a good thing, right? Happy customers, like they're probably going to buy more or stay longer or any of that kind of thing. And the statistics go on and on and on that prove that. Here's the problem though. CFO, who I'm sure probably understands, and because they're also a human, understands these statistics, they have a budget sheet. Okay, so what the question that leaders, including myself, have been asked is, okay, if we give you $70,000 to go hire somebody, how does that affect this number? And we go, yeah, but customers will love us. And no, that's not a number. That's not a number. Right. And what has happened this year in particular is there are some financial, they're not all good, but there are some financial guidelines and rules that the people that are funding companies with, they had to follow. And the result of that was cuts. And people weren't able to communicate back. Like if I had that extra headcount, then actually my OpEx goes down and my GRR is going to go up by, 1%. And by the way, I'll put that in numbers for you. That's about a $50,000, uplift. Does that make now? Is that a good thing? Heck, that $70,000 headcount now actually is only about $20,000. Maybe that's a good decision, right? But support and service leaders typically will gloss over and shut down when you start talking about financials. So in my consulting business, Everetics, one of the things that I did purely out of frustration, to be honest, was there are some, it's a game modeling system. And somebody had showed it to me and I was like, geez, I bet I could put financials in there. And so I had to go back because, people are very strict and there's statistical rules. So I had to go back. Didn't want to do it, but I had to relearn statistics from college and took the industry statistics out there. And we built a financial model that looks at customer satisfaction, that's statistically sound, and really empowers a support leader without having to do the statistics class or whatnot, to actually see dollars and cents in their decisions and be able to present that to a CFO or a CEO when they're making the hard decisions. If I put $1 into this, what's going to happen? We have to be able to answer that. And we're fairly terrible at answering that question. So sorry, I got on a little bit of a tear there, but you can't bring a knife to a gunfight. or you can, but you know what's going to happen. So stop, learn the business, read Good to Great, so you know the foundation of at least a lot of, the 50, 60-year-old CEOs out there, because that's what they had to read when they were growing up. So you know the vernacular, you know the language, and then it's not about being right or wrong. It's about understanding your perspective and being able to communicate with others effectively. So learn their language. It's not their job to do it. It's our job to do it. So if that means you got to go look up your stats book or take a quick online class about finances so you know what the rule of 40 is, do it. I wish I had done that 20 years earlier. Better late than never, though, I guess. But
of course. It's well said. I love it. On some level, I think we're coming at this we're beginning to quantify behavior, which is a difficult thing to do, because before we looked at it as sticks and carrots. Like, we can use money to provide this carrot to someone, or we can take this money away and provide a stick to them.
Mhm.
But I think that's kind of like pretty simplistic. It's like saying good or bad. Like, there's way more complexity to it. And what does it mean when we look way down the line and we see a happy customer who will always be with the company? Like, what is that worth? Well, we don't have the research. We don't thoroughly know. So it kind of gets thrown out of the lab as a subjective idea. Well, that's subjective. We can't measure that. We can't contain it. So we're not going to talk about it. But it seems like over the last few years, we're really beginning to see, terms like customer behavior, and it's interesting to put emotions into money and see this kind of thing moving forward as not separate, but together. Like, wow, yeah, the end result of the customer's behavior will translate into X amount of revenue in 4 years. Like, that's a pretty...
We have to identify that.
Yes.
We have to. And we don't... Customer experience people generally are not your mathematicians.
Yep.
There are some exceptions out there, which is really awesome when you meet them, but they're not. And that part of the conversation, we end up being the person that did bring the knife to the gunfight, and I'm sorry to keep sharing stories, but let me share another one with you. This is very true because it involves me, but my wife and I, we shop at Walmart Neighborhood Market. So in the US, Walmart, renowned for their great customer experience, also has a grocery store that offers about the same level of experience. I'm being very sarcastic. And we're in the South Bay of Los Angeles. So we have the Albertsons and the Ralphs and the Vons and the Hannaford Brothers and all of the really, really great stores probably within a mile of us as well. But we go to Walmart Neighborhood Market. And we were driving back and I had this moment of reflection. I was like, oh my gosh, I am such a hypocrite. I am on LinkedIn too many hours every day talking and expounding about the customer experience, and I'm driving back from freaking Walmart Neighborhood Market. What a hypocrite. And it hit me, and I was thinking about it. Luckily, and you can tell me if I'm rationalizing my way out of this one or not, but then it occurred to me that maybe I wasn't a hypocrite, and maybe I was paying less money at Walmart because the customer experience was equally crappy at all of the stores. So I had to wait, behind 8 people in line, to check out. I could have went to Albert's and paid more for my food and still waited 8 people behind in line, right? There was no difference. So I'm not completely stupid. I'm going to go spend less money for the same experience. And a lot of companies now have come to this reckoning. Again, decisions had to be made, right or wrong, in the beginning of the year. And most SaaS companies, you have to sign a contract. Usually it's an annual contract, right? So decisions were made, presumably, some customer experience was cut. And now these contracts have been coming up for renewal. And now people are having that Walmart versus Albertsons kind of moment. Like, shit, excuse my language. I'm why am I going to pay George more when I can pay somebody else less and there's no difference? So customer experience really, really matters. Now, if those grocery stores, any one of them, provided an elevated experience, that's where we're going. You know what I mean? But until that day comes, we're not. And a lot of companies right now are out there that had to make decisions, and I'm tiptoeing around, making cuts, riffs,
Yeah.
and things like that. Support and service got impacted very hard, and now customers are having their Walmart moment.
Yeah. It's interesting when we talk about grocery stores. There's a trend, and this could just be my idea of it, but when I see all these like self-checkout machines, like I get so infuriated. Like it seems to me like a big, like a tech company came to all the grocery stores like, look, I got a perfect way. You don't have to deal with employees. You have to pay them vacation. You have to deal with their dumb. You don't have to deal with these knuckleheads anymore. And you get to keep all that money for yourself, man. It's going to be so awesome. You're just going to go right over here. We're going to train people to do your job. We're going to train these monkeys to do all the job your employees do. Isn't that great? It's going to be so awesome for you. And like there's a store by my house that did it. And like they got rid of like almost all their checkers. And they put out all these machines and people would stand in line and be like, I'm going to wait. And they would get super pissed. Like, why don't we have more checkers over here? And like, a couple times I saw the owner and he was like, you guys want to use the machines? And I'd be like, I think those machines are horrible. Why don't you drop your prices if you're going to use those machines? What about all the employees you laid off? And like, it just rubs so many people the wrong way. It doesn't have to. Like, why don't you give back to the customer? If you're going to cut all that, why don't you give back to the customer? Like, why don't you make the service better for everybody? And that seems to be the methodology that harkens back to the budget. It's like, listen, there's more than the race to the bottom. Now, that's very naive, and maybe that's easy for me to say because I don't run that store. I don't have to deal with the budget. And so it's super easy for me to say that. And I'm trying to be empathetic there, but it seems like it could be a win-win. Like, couldn't you drop some prices, or couldn't you have some sort of specials, or couldn't you have one day a month where people use the machines, or you could set up something around it so people could feel like they're part of it instead of just, we're taking it all for us now. You know what I mean? Is that too crazy?
No, it's not crazy at all. It's a pretty common viewpoint too. The thing, when at least from my expertise, my experience in SaaS companies, when you start competing on price, you lose.
Yeah.
It very few companies are a Ryanair or similar kind of things like that.
Right.
Competing on price is a fool's errand. Don't do it. Then your story also reminds me a lot of kind of the debate, discussion, discourse going on in this year, around AI.
Yeah.
Around AI. And I have very passionate mixed feelings. I think there is absolutely like a good place for AI. Make humans better humans, better, faster, quicker humans. Although maybe you can tell me if you feel differently. I have never had a non-allergic reaction to a chatbot when I needed support or service. I'm always like, oh crap. I've gotta do this. Like, oh, I hope it works. Okay, how do I get to a human? How do I get to a human? And a lot of companies, it's the equivalent of, hey, cut Sally Sue, cut Joe Snuffy. Here, put a chatbot in there. Customers are like me, I think. Yeah. Check my consensus bias a little bit, but I think are like me and are like, oh my god, I don't want to do this. Anything but this, please.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you
I
don't
agree.
have a chatbot? I'll go over there. I'll go over
Mhm.
there and give you my money instead because you have checkers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And on some level, I think that those signals can get mixed. It's like, look, we're saving money. Are you, or is just no one want to deal with your stuff? Especially when it comes to healthcare. How many people hang up the phone because, like, you know what? I can't even deal with this right now. And they're like, look at that. You're saving all kinds of money, but you're also destroying your service at the same time.
Yep.
Like, it's interesting to think about. I think we'll figure it out. I gotta think that, you had mentioned that the opinion that I gave about checkers seems to be pretty common. And so the feedback has to be there. How long can you sit in your store and see customers lined up to wait for that one checker and be like, this is ridiculous? And how many of those people start going somewhere else?
Uh-huh.
It must be a very interesting predicament for someone who sees the potential rewards of saving so much and the potential of what it could be versus what's actually happening. That gets us back to human behavior. There's got to be a line in there somewhere where, like, okay, this is not working, but it works in Japan, man. It works there. Why doesn't it work here?
How do you think the checker with 9 people in line feels?
Horrible. They're stressed out of their mind. Like,
So
this is
so
ridiculous. I
are
can't
they
do all this.
Yeah. So I mean, are they going, if you go back to like our initial thing, taking care of your employees, right?
Right.
They're going to take care of your customers. So what's going to happen?
Yeah, they're gonna lose them.
So there are a lot of overlaps between the customer experience and finance and employee experience is ginormous in my mind. But I would leave the audience with a few things. Like, one, please, please don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Learn about finances. Ask. I've never had a CFO say, no, I won't explain this to you.
Yeah.
If you don't know something, learn about it and ask somebody, and it's okay. Employee experience is the enabler for amazing customer experience.
Yeah.
So treat your employees the way you want them to treat your customers. And if you do that, your employees are going to treat your customers even better. And then lastly, customer experience matters. Think of the Walmart story. Put yourself in those shoes, or think about a time that you've discontinued a service and you've went somewhere else, and ask yourself why.
Those are all great points, and those are great stories for people to learn from it and see themselves in. Do you see another shift that I kind of see taking place is this idea of like the creator economy? Sometimes when it looks like the walls are falling down, there's change from the ground up. And people go out on their own and they're able to find new ways to provide value to places. Do you see that landscape changing? Like, maybe because there is so many people being laid off, people are beginning to harness AI in a way they may not have done before. They say it's people change to inspiration or desperation. What are some of the changes you see on the forefront as far as the new economy emerging?
So that's a fascinating question. AI in particular, we haven't figured out yet, right? So we have a lot of early adopters, and we had a lot of rifts, and we're about to go through a lot of merger and acquisitions, which is the tail end of a not recession that we're in.
So funny.
But that's already starting to happen. We haven't figured out AI yet. There is a place for it.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Like, there is a tool called Sentisum out there. It's used by tech companies, typically B2C or business to customer, right? So consumers. And I'm sure that you've gotten a survey before, right? That either said, would you recommend us to a friend, family, colleague, or a follow-up, like, how would you rate Shane in the support interaction, right? You get those. And those are important. They're feedback for sure. They're not the end all be all. Now imagine you could look at every support ticket for this entire year, what everybody has said, and aggregate that up into some common themes, good or bad. That's called support operations, by the way, or a part of support operations. And it's tedious and it's hard, and AI can do that now. This product can do that. It can tell you almost in real time, like, here are the themes. This is what's breaking. And that has the real customer sentiment in it. When I swear at Shane in my ticket or whatnot, oh, I'm mad. That's real. And AI has a huge place to play in that regard. Probably in not every case, the AI chatbot, maybe in some cases, though it doesn't replace a human. It doesn't replace a human connection. Right. Go check out through your Walmart at the auto scan one, and it's no different probably than the other grocery store. There's no connection there. Good news is, it's a consistent experience, but it's just probably a plain vanilla experience. Didn't have an opportunity to create a moment memory with you. Anyway, sorry, you got me on all my soapboxes.
Good. That's interesting. When I think about AI, I see it as like this tool that's similar to a mirror. I think AI is us. And when we look at it, we get scared sometimes. Like, that's horrible. Look at what's happening. But it's just a reflection of us. Maybe AI in a support operation can help us understand our problem. And then we in the human condition can fix it. Because the AI can tell us, this is the problem. Look at these cuss words and look at the way these people are acting. But then you can take that and be like, okay, I can see the emotion from this external force now. Now I can begin to understand what I need to do to change it. You ever like hear your voice on a tape recorder, like, oh my gosh, I sound like that? Or someone plays back something that was a horrible instance of a fight, and you're like, I cannot believe I expressed myself that way. Yeah. I think that's what AI is doing on a grand scale, and we're looking at it like, oh no, AI is a huge problem. No, we're a huge problem. We don't thoroughly convey meaning when we need to. We find these extravagant ways to say things without actually doing them. It's like we can use all kinds of when we talk about statistics, numbers don't lie, but you can make them say whatever you want to.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. I have been at that
game. But AI has a way of putting it in context. Like, look at this. How are you going to use your numbers to paper over this particular detrimental problem to your business? Let me see you do that. And I think we're in the process of learning how to convey meaning. And that's another way the customer experience is getting better. Like, if a brand has a brand, what is the meaning of that brand? Is it service? Is it longevity? Is it the fact that they'll like Costco will take back anything? Like, what is your brand message and what does it mean to people? Because we got away from that for a while. It was this race to the bottom. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. It's probably the consumer's fault as much as the leadership's fault, is that we demand more for less. Maybe that's a problem from us too. We get what you deserve in some ways, but I'm hopeful that AI is this mirror that can show us the problem, and then we can re-inject the human condition in there and fix it. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. The AI is built on a language learning model, right? Or LLM. And guess who put the words in the language, to be modeled on? We did. So
yeah,
garbage in, garbage out, or whatnot. Until the machines start thinking for themselves, which will happen. It is a reflection on us. And your point around, the race to the bottom, there's an interesting statistic, that came out this year. It used to be an insult. We would say somebody doesn't have the attention span of a goldfish. Mm-hmm. And my number, I believe the attention span, they have figured out the attention span of a goldfish, I believe, is 8 seconds, 8.5 seconds, 9 seconds, somewhere in there. And as of this year, the average human's attention span is 7.5 seconds.
We did it.
So goldfish have a higher attention span, if you were to believe, these statistics, than a human. And one real example of this is when back in the beginning, around the dot bomb days, our attention span was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 13 seconds. And why is that important in support? It's important because when somebody picks up the phone and calls, you need to pick up the phone in a certain amount of time, right? And if I pick up the phone in 2 seconds, or I pick up the phone in 8 seconds, hygienically, there's no difference, right? So you don't need to staff to pick up the phone in 2 seconds. You can pick it up in 8 seconds, and that's okay. And what you can't do is pick it up in like 50 minutes, right? And that's when you frustrate customers. So answering the telephone in a short enough period of time is considered a hygienic satisfaction criteria, right?
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't make a happy customer, but it doesn't torque them off either, right? And using this very specific example, and the human's attention span's going down, that compresses that timeline. Now it's more expensive to pick up the phone. Maybe I do need to pick it up in 2 seconds. So it's really interesting how all this is impacting, I think the customer experience, the customer journeys, and themselves, and human attention span's a big part of it, because I'm my worst customer. If I can make me happy, 99 out of 100 people, I guarantee you, are going to be delighted. Yep. So I know how I feel, and I know I'm a really, really, really harsh critic, and I'm nice, I'm kind, going back to the ET, but I definitely vote with my feet, and won't go back to a place, unless there is value in it for me. So it's a changing world, my friend. Changing world. AI, it's going to be, just buckle your seatbelt for another year or two.
Yeah. I'm really bullish on it. I realize that with any sort of technology comes change, like the same way the internet changed the way we model reality, or the same way that books gave us ideas like exact repeatability.
Mm-hmm.
I speak to a lot of teachers when my kid goes to school, and I think there's a debate at their school as much as there is a debate in the world of education that speaks to the idea of, wow, kids are just going to have all their papers written or something like that. But maybe for this initial phase, this courting phase, if you will, we're learning like the easy things about the machine, the same way we learn the easy things we're attracted to people. But that relationship matures, and maybe for education, and this is just an example of how we may use AI in the future, is that we get away from the linear idea of education is writing a paper and reciting it. Maybe the next generation of education is writing a paper, and you get graded on that, and then performing that material in a different way. Maybe you got to do a dance to do it, or give us a poem, or do them both, and then you have to explain why the dance you did is equivalent to that information. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting to use different and seeing from different modalities and different perspectives. Like, oh, it's up there. Look up here. This is the way it is, and maybe you get a better understanding. But it's just this initial courtship that's really dangerous and scary and alien to us in some ways. Is that too far out there? Like, do you see that on the horizon as a potential good for the AI?
I can say I concur with everything you just said. I also feel like I don't know what AI is going, what's going to come of it. I've seen some really, really terrible use cases. And I've seen some really amazing use cases as well and implementations. I use it for some things. Like if I run into a problem on my website or a plugin that needs to be something like that, Chat GPT is like hands down, like, holy cow, way better than Google. But I would never, ever, ever, ever write a post on LinkedIn and put it up there. And I can smell them like 2 blocks down and 1 over, the ones that do use it. They're awful. They don't connect. And so I think we're going to figure it out as we go. I hope it goes okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Probably not the answer you wanted, but
Of course it is. It's a beautiful answer. I love learning, and I'm hopeful that it teaches us more about, on some levels, I wonder, does AI have a culture? Like, if you look at the Western culture, where we seem to focus on, our family structure is we tend to separate the family. Like the old folks go to an old folks home, the kids go to school, and then the parents go to work. But we all go these different ways. And like in Eastern culture, the family unit is much more tighter. Now I'm wondering if, on some level, does AI have its own culture? Is it the melding of 2 cultures together? I go way out in the woods, man. When I start thinking about it, like, what does that mean? How does it change? Maybe it's an agent of change for culture, And it's so fun to think about, and it's such a powerful technology. And I feel like we have this incredible tool in our hand, but instead of using it, we're trying to figure out the best way to hold it. Like, I think you should put 2 fingers here. Nope, put 1 over here. But hey, how about we start using this thing to see what happens, man?
Yeah. Pretty cool. Cool. It's gonna be interesting. Buckle your seatbelt for sure.
I think so. Yeah. Shane, this is amazing. I really love our conversation. I love the fact that you don't pull back any punches. You're very candid, and you're happy to talk about whatever we got going on. And it seems to be a testament to the Everetics Foundation. And I'm real thankful. I hope people can go down into the show notes and dig into what you're doing and book a call with you. And what is the best way, maybe before I let you go, where can people find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
Oh, well, so the easiest, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there way too much. So Shane Smith. My website is Everetics, so everetics.com. So EVERITICS. And my email is really simple. It's shane@everetics.com. So feel free to reach out to me that way. On the website, you can book some time if you'd like to, meet and have an introduction, and we can talk through really whatever. I am a self-proclaimed not salesman. So what I like to say is, like, book a time, and, who knows, we might just have a good conversation, and that's okay. So I appreciate it. But everetics.com, Shane@everetics.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn anytime.
Fantastic. So ladies and gentlemen, go down to the show notes, book a chat. He's a fascinating guy to talk to. And we've had multiple conversations, and I feel like I'll get to walk away with new insights. So I really appreciate it. Hang on briefly afterwards. I'd like to speak for a moment afterwards, but to the people that are watching and listening, I hope you have a beautiful weekend. I hope the rest of your day goes amazing. And thank you for tuning in and having some fun with us today. That's all we got. Aloha.